Good morning and welcome to the final day of Automate 2025. My name is Brian Heater. I am the managing editor at A3. Kicking things off with Nick Sischka.
Perfect.
Oh, got it.
Nailed
Okay.
it.
And you're the director of imaging product development at Edmunds Optics, based in Jersey.
Yep. Yep.
What goes on in Cherry Hill, New Jersey?
So we've been there, since 1942. So minor movements within that area, but founded actually as a company that was doing military salvage during World War II, and then leveraged into hobbyist optics and educational optics, and then finally into industrial optics, where we still are today.
I was reading a little bit about your founder, about Mr. Edmunds himself, who I guess passed away maybe about
2
10
years.
years ago. But it is a really interesting story that he was in the military and kind of found all these optics around and realized he could resell them, put an ad in a magazine, and that was the beginning of the company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so the company's still family owned. So now it's third generation. So Norman's granddaughter Mari Edmund is now
Okay.
the CEO of the company, and it's fantastic because of the way that the family runs the company is really, really modern, and
Mm.
it's not run like a small family company. They run it the way that they intend it to run and intend it to grow, and the amount that they care about the employees and the amount that they care about the industry is really amazing.
So at what point in that, what is that? I mean, it's 80 years, I guess? Okay.
80ish, yep.
I'm very tired. 80
It's been
years.
a long week.
Yeah. At what point do robotics and does automation really enter the picture for you?
Yeah, so that entered our picture in Edmund Optics in the early 2000s. We had started leveraging into the optical component space
Mm.
in the mid 80s, early 90s, and
Components
then
for
for optics. So
just
just
okay.
literally think about like a single lens or a
Mhm.
filter or a beam splitter or a prism or something like that. We had started to wade into designing of those elements, and we started manufacturing them later on in the late 90s and started acquiring manufacturing capabilities, and then we decided, well, we've become experts at designing these component level optics, and we can design metal that wraps around them. So if we cross reference that against this new industry that's coming into play, machine vision, we can develop imaging lenses that are going onto the cameras to do machine vision, and that has grown tremendously over the last 25 years, and it's why we're here today at Automate.
Is most of your business now in that kind of machine vision AI space?
No, it's about it depends on how you split it. So
Sure.
imaging at Edmund Optics is about 70% of the business,
Okay.
but the industrial vision and the way that we think about vision within these walls is about 25% of the business.
What's the other 30%?
We're smattered all over the place, right?
Yeah.
So you can think about free space optical communications. You can think about the telecommunications market. You can think about life sciences. You can think about non-imaging related things where you're
Mm.
pointing light in certain directions. So, and then covers so many different markets. We try to stay really diversified so that, say, for instance, if, when the semicon market, which is very cyclical,
Yeah.
when it cyclically drops and goes down, we don't take a huge hit from that because we're very diversified.
Are you doing manufacturing in New Jersey as well?
We are. Yep. There's some
Yeah.
prototype manufacturing that's going on in New Jersey and some small volume production. We also have in the United States, we have a plant in Florida
Mm.
that manufactures our high-end laser optics coatings, and then we do advanced assemblies in our Tucson facility in Arizona.
Yeah, you were asking me earlier what I've been talking about all week, and obviously, some geopolitical conversations have been part of it, and tariffs, and this really dates back to the pandemic or even earlier of sort of decentralizing manufacturing,
hmm
reshoring, they call it. Is that something that you're looking at, is introducing more manufacturing into the U.S.?
It is. So the ability to grow different markets, as I said, the defense market is huge in the U.S., of course, and we've been players in that space
Mm.
for quite some time.
I mean,
Uh,
really since the beginning, in a sense.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly. If you think all the way back,
yeah.
indeed. Yeah, I hadn't actually put that together. But there's the defense markets. There's also, I mentioned, I think, directed energy, um, and free space communications. And so we're in these spaces as well. And the other reason why we want to develop manufacturing here is because there's the expertise and the knowledge to do that here,
Mm.
with the really advanced assemblies that you otherwise can't do, and not because you can't get the equipment other spaces, but it's difficult to find the talent.
And will robotics and automation be a big part of that manufacturing process? I guess, is it already?
It is. We do utilize some automation specifically on the component manufacturing piece. We're trying to implement it into more of the assemblies as we keep moving forward.
Has it been a challenge? It sounds like it's been a bit of a challenge.
It can be because
Yeah,
so if you look at my product offering in imaging optics, right? So we have about 900 different imaging lenses, and I sell about 150,000, manufacture about 150,000 lenses a year. And so a lot of those, though, divided but through those 900 parts, it's a lot of high mix. So automation, as we know, is mostly fantastic at doing the same thing over and over again.
sure.
But I'm only making my highest running parts are 5, 10,000 pieces a year.
Mm.
So it's really, it can be challenging to implement an automation system to do those assemblies, but that's where we utilize it in the component space because it's a lot more high volume at a smaller mix in terms of the product set.
Perhaps down the road you're looking at more generalized robotics. Obviously, humanoids have been a big part of this conversation. Systems that can kind of pivot and do multiple things.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how we're trying to implement that across our manufacturing sites right now. We're not looking at humanoids yet.
Sure,
I think humanoids have a really long way to go
I think that's
before
fair.
they're useful, but
Yeah.
it is cool to see them here. Just that's one of the major things I've noticed in the difference between last year and this year was last year there were a lot of humanoids in this building, and this year there's a more muted presence of the humanoids.
Yeah, I have theories. I won't go into them. You know, some are good, some are less good. I know that everybody like in this space is very busy right now, so you really kind of have to pick and choose where you're going to be. But from a product standpoint, have you been having those conversations with the humanoid makers as far as implementing your technology into their robots?
We haven't with humanoids specifically, but I think there have been a lot of discussions around just AMRs in general and
Yeah,
autonomous mobile robots for those not familiar.
I
And
hopefully,
but the so we've been having those more generalized discussions. Humanoids, not so much yet.
yeah. We were talking earlier about, I guess, you know, the diversification of the different fields that you cover in optics. You know, you mentioned defense before, but the thing that really jumped out at me as I was looking into the company a little bit is autonomous vehicles. Is that something that you've been involved in for a while now?
It is, and autonomy is a really interesting space for us at Edmund Optics, because if you look at the factory automation market, where our imaging lenses really grew up, that market's really mature now. It's still growing, but it's a mature market, and there's in terms of new technologies to develop, autonomy brings an interesting cross section there
Mm,
because you're taking all of the technology that you've developed for factory automation, and then you're taking it outside and you're going into let's even take a warehouse or factory environment. You might be on an AMR that's going from inside in an air conditioned environment to a warm humid environment outside, making sure that your lenses aren't fogging, your camera system
interesting.
isn't fogging, those types of things, or dealing with it might be raining outside, or maybe it's really hot when the sun hits the lens, and how does that going to impact the way that the robot's going to be able to drive itself or be able to see? And so developing technologies from the coding side and from the assembly side, from the optics side, to be able to handle all those different environments is a really unique challenge.
Asking as a glasses wearer, how do I stop my lenses from fogging?
Uh, it's really difficult to do. There are coatings that are available.
Yeah.
If you have polycarb lenses, it's a little bit more
Okay.
difficult. Usually, the coatings work much better on glass.
Got it. So yeah, so controlled environments that is a really interesting topic of conversation for me. You know, right now, the way I'm seeing it, the two kind of major uncontrolled and very difficult environments are autonomous vehicles. So like, you know, freeways and streets, there's a lot of moving parts and the stakes are very high. A home, I don't know if that's something that you operate in as well, but as far as like difficulty navigating an unstructured environment, that's a big one. You work in ag tech before, ag tech as well. And ag tech is kind of interesting, right? It's kind of, in some senses, it's controlled, in other senses, not so much.
Yeah, I think agritech is a great leap from or a great step from the factory, right? Because you had mentioned full blown autonomous vehicles on our roads, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like that's the panacea,
It's
right?
kind of
And
he, you know, it was here and now it's here and kind
exactly,
of
and
now it's
it's nuclear fusion
yeah,
of vision, right? Just it's consistently 20 years away.
yeah,
Actually, if from the A3 Business Forum, there was one of the talks mentioned in January that the first autonomous vehicle paper was published in the 1950s.
really,
And so autonomous vehicles have been talked about for a really long time,
yeah.
but right, that's with respect to what's going on way down here, and that's a really complex environment. It gets more complex every day. There's more cars on the road, there's construction constantly, all these things. But instead of trying to go from the factory to your roads and freeways, You have warehouses, you have distribution centers, you have agricultural fields. And those are really great stepping stones where the technology that exists today is more than enough to be able to handle those semi-controlled environments.
And how much of a challenge, we were talking a bit about drones before, how much of a challenge is aerial imaging?
It can be a really fun challenge, right? If you think about aerial imaging from a consumer's perspective, right, where we've all got our little DJI drones and we're zipping around there, even that's becoming more difficult to fly because of airspace
Yeah.
constraints and things like that. But from a technology perspective, it's really interesting because you're predicated on lightweight, right?
Hmm.
If you're trying to maximize your battery power, your airtime, you want to be in the air as long as possible, which means you want to have the lightest weight that you possibly can. And
Is imaging or optics a significant contributor to the weight
it
of the
is.
system?
And
Yeah.
so that's the fun part, right? Because as we want to have higher and higher resolutions, and we want to be able to see more, perhaps from a higher distance or what have you, you need to have optics that are capable of that resolution. And so the optics tend to want to grow. And so there are techniques that we can utilize that can keep that weight down and also keep the performance up, right? We're using different materials on the barrels. We're using different types of optics within the structure itself of the lens, all to both get that increased performance and not suffer the environmental effects and also have a lightweight.
Well, I think we're actually at about time right now, wrapping up. But am I going to see you at the Focus event in Seattle in September?
Yes, I'm unbelievably excited for that event. I think it's going to be an interesting show and conference for imaging in the United States. We have Automate, of course, for factory automation and all that, but I'm really excited to see how AI is going to influence imaging and how we can look at imaging outside of factory automation.
Great. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger, every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Las Vegas, a new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.
Good morning and welcome here to our last day of the Automate Show. I'm Josh Ebert with A3, the Association for Advancing Automation, and I am honored today to have here with us Scott Klosowski, the founding partner for FPOV. And this is kind of a little fanboy moment for me. So I'm going to let Scott tell you just a little bit real quick about what FPOV is, kind of what you guys are doing, and then we've got some exciting things to talk about.
Well, FPOV stands for Future Point of View, but we're about a 22-year-old advisory firm that helps organizations and leaders with where technology is going in the future, what type of strategies they should put together.
Awesome. Yeah. So I think I'd already told you, but I discovered you guys through just that organic method. My dad had actually seen some of your stuff, has done some work with you and shared it over. And so I hadn't heard anything about you, but tuned into that first, Q1 update you guys had done and just kind of immediately fell in love. So I, suckered you into being here, which I appreciate. So thank you very much. And I'm excited for this, early morning and this afternoon. You're going to be able to speak too, which I'll hopefully be able to jump over and catch that. So we've got some exciting things there, but I don't want to spoil any of that. So I think today, as an education person with an education background and working with our education team here, I'm really going to be looking at, some of the workforce topics, some of these scary questions that people are talking about. And I think one of the ones I want to start with is this idea that we constantly hear, especially as we work with students and future employers, or future employees, all it's automation. What's it going to do to jobs? Are there going to be jobs for us? Are they all going to be taken because we'll be replaced by robots? What are your thoughts on that from the work you've done and the things you're seeing out there?
Well, it's a big question I get asked quite a bit when I'm giving talks. And, it used to just be robotics and what we would call machine intelligence, right? That people were worried about replacing physical jobs. Uh, and then AI hit. And now we have the twins, right? We have the concerns about replacing the physical jobs, like at a factory or at a plant. And now we have the concerns about the white collar jobs.
Right.
How many jobs might AI, take away? And look, because I get paid to look into the future and try to be accurate with predictions, I have zero concerns about the workforce being decimated, by all of this automation. I don't think we have anything in history that shows us that that's the case.
Sure.
I think every time we automate and we replace tasks human beings do, we create as many new tasks or new jobs. I think that's the first thing to understand. I think the second thing to understand is every time you automate, you improve the efficiency, the ability to build more faster with higher quality. And the world always wants more.
Yeah.
And so we're not seeing a bunch of layoffs from AI that are causing big problems in the workforce, for example. We're seeing some layoffs that are being related to AI, but we are creating laying off. And so I just have zero concerns at a macro level
Sure.
about the economy. At a personal level, where one person is laid off from a job that was highly repeatable or doing mundane tasks or some physical task, and maybe they can't upskill or reskill to something new because they choose not to,
Yeah.
then I see at a personal level that could be a problem.
Sure. Well, you mentioned right there at the end, upskilling, reskilling, maybe a choice to not do that. So we had actually some speakers yesterday at our education, aspect of the day. It was our educator day, mostly at the university and college level. But I was really surprised to hear that a lot of them are saying that they're seeing in their computer science classes this big drop off. Some of them said 30% enrollment had dropped. And just to kind of give some definition or context, they said, for them, they're considering computer science, robotics technicians, AI, all those things kind of broadly falling under that topic. But do you have any thoughts on, why that's happening? If people are willing to upskill or reskill, why are they not enrolling like mad into these university courses to go and chase all these hot skills that we're hearing about?
Well, I think some of it is probably my fault. I'm in technology, been my entire career, and I did not go to a university.
Okay.
So I was self-taught when I was 18, and did well. And I and some other people like me are a bit prototypes from a generation or two before of in the technology space, not in every space, but in this space, there's a great ability to self-learn or to learn on the job in ways maybe you can't do with every other industry. But I think specifically with universities, it's a recipe of why they're seeing a lower amount of students gravitating towards these fields. I think more students can go to a career tech and do an intensive 1 or 2 year program and go right into the workforce, making the same amount of money they would with a 4 year. And so it's just more practical for them. Again, I think there are a number that are feeling like they can go right into the workforce and learn on the job for 4 years and be in a better spot than if they go through a university. And then the last thing is, I think there's a growing awareness that in technology, it moves so fast that by the time you go and get a 4-year degree in any kind of technology field,
Yeah,
by the time you get out, you're already halfway behind,
sure.
right? People that are out in the market. So I think there's good reasons why we're seeing a lower amount of people at universities.
Yeah. And I think I know the answer to this, so I'm maybe setting you up for a bump set here. But so does that mean that universities and colleges are dead? Do you see them going to the wayside? As somebody who has a 4-year degree, I love my university experience. I want that for everyone to some degree, but I also, taught at career tech where a lot of students were in your situation. They were leaving right out, never going to university, being highly successful. So just out of curiosity, what do you see as the future of the kind of university post high school landscape?
I don't think universities go away.
Yeah.
I think they evolve.
Yep.
I mean, they have some fundamental problems right now, the costs, the loans, sometimes the amount of time it takes, maybe not being able to construct your own degree the way some people want to. So I think they have some friction.
Okay.
And so I think universities will have to evolve. I think maybe some of the really well-known high brand universities won't be so high brand anymore, and we might have some other universities that grow. So I just think that area evolves, and I think
Yeah.
a lot of it is because we still need for a lot of young people, we need a place and a way for them to be socialized into being an adult. If nothing else, something between 18 and
Yeah.
right that helps them make that transition into being an playing that role. And then I also think it is called higher learning.
Yeah.
So regardless of the market and the industries, I think universities provide a good place for higher learning. I just don't think they might be as dominant as they have been
Sure.
as far as the being, one of the only options when you get out of high school.
Sure. The vehicle may change, but ultimately there's different ways to get there. The destination for each person is still something beyond high school, and they just have
I
to.
agree. I
Yeah.
love career techs. I love career techs. I think they play a great role in the world, and I think that they will grow in what they're able to do in 2 years.
Yeah.
That can launch a young person 2 years faster than most universities will.
But one of the buzzwords that we were hearing in career tech, which is where I had most recently taught before coming to A3, you hear this a lot, and it's not exclusive to that level. I think colleges and universities are starting to get on board with this, but that idea of like credentialing certificates, maybe in place of a formal degree, or even micro credentialing is really popular. Do you see that playing a part into this kind of new education model that we might be envisioning?
I do, and I absolutely love this. I
Okay.
mean, I come out of right now a very edgy AI, robotics kind of world.
Yeah.
You don't need 4 years of education to be good in this world.
Yeah.
You need 2 years, and some micro credentialing would be fantastic. Uh, yes, I love the concept of, hey, let's not overvalue a university degree, and let's not undervalue what you could do in a year or two of intensive learning.
Yeah. Well, and something else we had talked about earlier that was also interesting from one of the speakers yesterday was this concept of this 7-to-1 ratio that he had thrown out. And he was talking about like all the different needs within any industry, not just, automation, whether this is medical, whether this is, science with NASA, any field basically has these roles where there's, one at the top level, whether you consider that someone like a PhD holder, right? Someone who's very conceptual, research, philosophical, they're sort of innovating and driving the future ideas. And then beneath them are maybe two people kind of at maybe it's like a 4-year college level. We're kind of making some stereotypes here, but they're the people that have to take those conceptual ideas and do something with them, invent the next product, the camera, the robot, or whatever, the engineers. And then the next level that I thought was most interesting, you talked about the seven, right? He called them technicians. I think it could vary, but the idea that those are almost like the doers, the ones that are, I think, my successful career tech students, the ones that had that all the essential skills they needed at that point in their life to go out and start enacting and taking some of these ideas and really doing something with them. So, I mean, do you say that whole thing is loosely accurate based on what you see? You throw that to the wind, but does that structure seem to still exist? And do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that structure exists. I think it's different for different industries. You
Yeah.
might say, oh, in the accounting space, maybe it's 1 to 10,
Yeah.
right? In manufacturing it's a little bit different, but yes, I think generally that model is right. You have one very expansive thinker.
Yeah.
You have two that are absolute builders and can go get a lot of things done. And then you have a handful that are the people that have to operate,
Yeah.
right? They have to operationalize something and keep it going. So I think that's very true.
Okay.
But the comment I would make is, I think there's an assumption that the one and the two come out of high level universities,
Yeah.
and the seven don't have a degree
Sure.
or maybe came through a career tech, and I think that's wrong.
Okay.
I think that sometimes the one and the two came up in a non-traditional way, not through a master's degree or a PhD. And I think of the seven, three of them have university degrees and are maybe not happy about it.
A big debt with those.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
right. And we have that problem in the world that people feel like after they get out of university, there's a certain amount of people that feel like they got taken.
Yeah.
Like, hey, wait, I thought my next step was $150,000 a year job,
Right.
and I came out and I can only get let's say a $60,000 a year job.
But my debt didn't change accordingly.
Exactly.
Well, what do you, on that note of these people, whether it's those ones we just talked about, or even someone who was in high school, they took their first job and then they said, this isn't for me. What do we say to those people that need to quickly reskill or upskill to try to find a new role? Do you have pieces of advice for them? What can they really do to do that quickly in this rapidly changing field?
I think the good news for everybody that is young, coming into the business world now or young in the business world right now, the economy is very solid, here in the United States. We got very low unemployment. And it doesn't look like that's going to change anytime soon. So that means it's easy for people to pivot into another field. There are jobs in every field, right, that are available. Uh, I think the hardest thing I noticed about people pivoting and trying something different is their own barriers, right? Their own, oh, I thought I was going to be. We had an intern. Get an accounting degree.
Yeah.
Was going to go get her CPA. Her dad was an accountant. Told her she needed to be an accountant. She went to work for us. We had her doing graphic arts, doing some different things like creating slide decks and things like that. She loved it, especially working with all the AI tools to do it. And she changed after 4 years of accounting. Right
All that
before she went to take her
investment.
CPA, she's like, "Nope, I'm a graphic artist."
Hey.
And she's talented at that and went on, to do that. She didn't have the mental barrier of, oh, I have to be this
Right.
and I'm a failure if I'm not.
Yeah.
So that's the big thing I would tell anybody. I have pivoted a number of times in my career. I had no idea I would be doing what I'm doing now when I was 18 or in my 20s. I took what the market gave me and I kind of went where I felt led to go.
Yeah.
And I took advantage of breaks along the way. And I feel very happy that I did that. Anyone else can do that.
Yeah. Well, it's something I don't think you explicitly said, but you alluded to that I'm a big fan of is that experiential learning, right? With your intern, that through that experience of just doing something, whatever the reason, she was kind of thrown into organically or by happenstance and finds the thing that she loves to do. And I wish we could find some way to recreate more of that. And I'm sure we could probably talk about that for another 15 minutes. But as I feared, we were going to run out of time. So I want to end with our last couple minutes on maybe a more actionable question. So here in just a little bit, we're actually going to have over 1,000 students, kind of middle school to high school, some collegiate students coming in to get to experience the last day of Automate through our next gen student tours. You seem like a very optimistic person from what I've gotten to know about you. What do you just say to them as they're thinking about this future and this, not in this, career landscape, but just the world that's about to become from all this technology, from all this automation? Just what does it look like to them and what advice maybe you give them?
All right, good question. And by the way, I am optimistic, but I'm not optimistic because I just have rose-colored glasses, right? I mean, I study history, I try to study trends, I study facts. There's a reason that I am optimistic about where things go, right? So for anybody who's young, right, coming up, I would say, first of all, you're coming up into a great world as far as a workplace.
Yeah.
What is going to be critical is for you to make a decision on what your relationship to technology is like.
Yeah.
And so, for example, if we take AI tools are going to allow you to amplify your skills for the rest of your career, the rest of your life.
Right.
If you choose to learn to use it and to integrate AI into what you do and into your life. Now, AI is just one type of technology, but I think I would just say, as a young person, I don't care what field you love, whether it's healthcare or being an accountant or a lawyer or an engineer, uh, it'll be important for you to really have a great relationship with technology, to co-work with technology
Yeah.
from this point forward, to increase your capabilities and your power, your ability to get things done with technology. If you want to progress in the marketplace,
Yeah.
if you do not like technology and you want to have a job that is just human, right? Human
Yeah.
relationships, there will be some of those jobs as well,
Yeah.
right? But you're gonna have to go find those and specialize there.
Yeah.
For everyone else, really consider your relationship with technology if you want to excel, the next 30, 40 years.
Okay. Well, I think that actually is right on the mark with time we've got. So I'm super appreciative of you being here today. I hope that everyone's able to get to your session here in a little bit and hear you speak some more. This is probably just a little teaser, I'm sure, of the many things you're going to talk about. But thank you again for being here. And thank you to everyone who tuned in. We'll be back in a few minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger, every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Las Vegas, a new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.
connection is at the center of human experience.
And technology solutions can address that.
The best uses of tech are when they bring people together, when they share information, and when they're creating meaning and impact.
Behind every piece of tech is human creativity.
Technology and innovation is woven through the fabric of human experience.
And helps with some of the challenges we face.
It is revolutionizing the field of care by filling gaps in order to support us in the best way.
It's like traveling with a doctor in your pocket.
With the rise of artificial intelligence, it's more important than ever to teach computer science in schools.
Well, you. Yes, you.
Because AI is going to change everything about our lives.
Automation, robotics, and AI are the tools that can help us do more with less.
It's not about replacing us.
Embracing technology can give us more time to do what we love, to create, to connect, to grow.
Technology doesn't slow me down. It does keep me going.
The future isn't a distant dream, it's happening right now.
And I'm really excited about it.
The old and the new come together in a brand new way is absolutely mind-blowing. It is beautiful.
Welcome to the age of automation.
If you zoom in, you see so much has changed. But if you zoom out, you realize so much more needs to change.
We're big believers in this robotics and grinding and finishing space. And we believe that we're in the early stages of growing this into a big segment of the robotics industry.
The goal is increasing consistency, increasing quality, increasing throughput outputs.
My 30 years at 3M, I've been on a lot of grinding shops. And these jobs, for the humans, it's no fun. We need to help these guys.
There are 4 recognized material removal labs across the country. The 3M CAM Center, there's a 3M lab that's housed at PushCorp in Dallas, Texas. The idea of de-risking these projects through these labs, you're showing up with your parts or your customer's parts. And you're working hand in hand with these abrasive experts, robot experts, to really de-risk an application.
We're always looking at how we can improve, especially our abrasives, for the robotics industry.
You know who your friends are. I reached out to 3M. They were instrumental in getting me started on this project, get some trials done early on at the CAM Center. It's really informative to just understand, is this even a feasible process, and what kind of tools might work for us. And of course, abrasives. CAM Center's got pretty much everything you could imagine.
This product has been in the 3M lab, but now it's really doing a great job, and it's taken the time to do this from about 4 hours to under 30 minutes.
At Automate, we announced a co-branded system with 3M. They take abrasives very seriously. So they had all the graphs, the way the abrasives wear over time, the improvements that they've systematically made to those abrasives. That's super important for an automated system.
Yeah, you can consign equipment, you can wire it up, you can ask for abrasives. But now what happens if you find out all this equipment that I just spent weeks wiring up, programming, isn't the right one? Now I've got to ask for a bigger spindle or a smaller spindle or a different abrasive. We started with this, now we need to go with belts. These labs have all that in it in one place. The idea is you're going to leave with a recipe for success. You're going to save weeks, if not months of time that you're going to condense into a very short time cycle. We couldn't have done this without the support of our sponsors, particularly 3M, for making this event happen.
We are the stalwart defenders of robotic grinding and finishing.
I was born in Melbourne, Australia in 1959. That's the same year that Joe Engelberger and George Devol put their first prototype robot into a factory in New Jersey. The company Unimation was founded about 2 years later. I was a geeky kid growing up in the 1960s, and I was obsessed with the space program. I wanted to be an astronaut. My parents gave me this book about robots, which may have had some long-term subconscious effect on me. As a teenager, I was really into electronics, and at that time, that mostly meant radios with vacuum tubes and transistors. By my mid-teens, it was digital electronics with integrated circuits, and by my late teens, I built my first microprocessor kit, terribly underpowered by modern standards. It was a no-brainer to study electrical engineering, and I went to the University of Melbourne and I got really interested in control theory. My first job was at the same university working for my controls professor, and that's where I discovered real-time computing. This was using digital equipment, PDP-11 and LSI-11 hardware. For an open day, I connected a cheap and cheerful mini mover robot to an LSI-11 and got it to play checkers. That really piqued my interest in robotics, and not long after that I got a job with Australia's national lab, CSIRO, working on flexible manufacturing cells. This was the mid-1980s. The lab had just been set up and had state-of-the-art gear like a Unimation Puma 560 and an Automatics AutoVision 2 vision system. In 1988, I won a fellowship to spend nearly a year at the University of Pennsylvania's GRASP lab, and there I was really fortunate to be able to work with Professor Lou Paul. I was nearly 30, I was the old guy in a lab full of grad students, and at that time I didn't have a PhD. When I returned to Australia, I started my own PhD, and that was about combining high-speed computer vision and robotics. I wrote lots of MATLAB code to support my research, and that eventually became the robotics toolbox for MATLAB. In 1995, I moved to Brisbane to apply robotic technology to the mining industry. We automated dragline excavators for open pit mining. By the late 90s, we were doing fully autonomous underground driving. We did early work on aerial drones, navigating using visual and inertial sensing. These were hobby-class helicopters, not the electric quad-rotor drones that we have today. We applied those same inertial and visual navigation techniques to underwater drones. I'd worked on applied robotics research for 25 years when I was offered a professorial position at the Queensland University of Technology in 2010. I took a gap year before the new job to travel and to write a textbook. I've always liked explaining things, and as a robotics practitioner, I thought that code was no less important than maths. The book could leverage the robotics and vision toolboxes that by now are around 20 years old and fairly mature. Computer vision had been a really important part of all the robotic systems I'd built over the previous 25 years. And so I really believed that any modern textbook on robotics had to include a decent treatment of computer vision. Writing the book was hard, but it was a labour of love, and it was published in 2011. As a new professor, there was a lot to be done, creating new undergraduate courses, recruiting graduate students, setting up labs, and writing grant proposals. In 2014, we were fortunate to win a grant for a Centre of Excellence in Robotic Vision, combining my two favourite things. This was a 7-year grant in partnership with 3 other Australian universities, and I was the centre director. In the 2010s, there was a lot of interest in MOOCs, massive open online courses, that they were going to transform university education as we knew it. In 2015, my university supported the development of 2 6-week MOOCs, one on robotics and one on computer vision. These no longer run as MOOCs, but most of the assets are available freely online at the QUT Robot Academy, and they continue to be very popular with students from all over the globe. In 2017, I received the Australian University Teacher of the Year Award, which recognised a portfolio of work that included open source software, the textbook, and the online teaching resources. During the pandemic lockdown, I worked with 2 of my students to rewrite the old MATLAB toolboxes into Python. The MATLAB code was by now 30 years old, which is a very long time for any piece of software. Python was entrenched as the most popular programming language. It was fully open source, and it has an amazing ecosystem of packages. An update to my textbook was due, and that actually resulted in 2 third editions. One, with colleagues from the MathWorks, uses MATLAB and their recent toolboxes, not my old open source ones. The second, using the new Python toolboxes, made it possible to rewrite the book with all the example code written in Python. It's been an amazing journey. I certainly didn't set out to be a teacher, but the various resources that I've created through my career have influenced many, many people. I actually don't know how many, but I do get lots of nice emails, and people come and chat to me at conferences and say nice things. Writing a textbook is a sub-minimum wage endeavour. It's the positive feedback from readers that makes it all worthwhile. So in that vein, I am totally delighted to be the recipient of a 2025 Engelberger Award for Education.
It started with steam. It advanced with electricity and combustion. It evolved with circuits. And now, it moves, it acts, it thinks. The Industrial Revolution isn't coming, it's happening now. What if innovation didn't take decades? Not 10 years, not 5, but today. Are you ready? Are you a part of it? It's not man versus machine, it's man and machine, side by side, powering progress together. You think this is just about robots? About ones and zeros? Just cameras and components? No, it's about hunger. It's about drive. It's about the ones who refuse to be left behind. It's about precision, power, quality, performance. It's about doing the work when no one else is watching, seeing the future before anyone else does. Will resist. But the bold, the relentless, the visionaries, they're the ones who win. They're the ones who automate.
A3, the Association for Advancing Automation, is excited to soon be releasing new online curriculum and credentials. We're excited to give a sneak peek of a course in development with Bob Rochelle, a popular Automate conference presenter for many years. The following excerpt is from the first course in our soon-to-release Getting Started with Industrial Robotics. It's a great program for businesses considering a shift to automation. An adapted version will also be available for high schools and colleges offering introductory robotics programs. To learn more, email education@automate.org. We hope you enjoy this small sneak peek.
Let me give you a better example. Beer. You've probably heard of beer. It's usually packaged in consistent units, 6 packs, 12 packs, which are actually 2 6s, or 24 packs, which are either 2 12s or 4 6s. The big breweries run at crazy speeds, about 2,000 bottles per minute, so manual palletizing isn't an option. They use hard automation systems. Palletizers that create a layer of 6, 12, or 24 packs, shuffle that onto a pallet, lower it, and repeat this process thousands of times a day. It's a fantastic solution. Until someone like Costco comes knocking. Costco shows up and says, "Hey, we'd love to buy a few rail cars full of your beer every year, but here's the thing, we want it in 18 packs, or maybe 36 packs. Better yet, give us a sampler pack, 3 of each of your flavors, all in one case." And just like that, the whole system breaks down. Those hard automation palletizers are built for 6, 12, and 24 pack layouts. That's it. They can't handle odd size, custom mixes, or unique packaging configurations. You're locked in unless you bring in something more adaptable. Enter flexible automation, aka robotics. This is where robots come in. They give you the flexibility that you need. They can be reprogrammed, they can adapt to different package sizes, they can handle all those one-off orders that would choke a traditional system. Let's get back to our buddy Willie. When his son and that crew finally graduated high school, Willie found himself empty-handed again. The temporary help was gone, and the labor shortage was once again making it tough just to keep things running day to day. Willie and his team finally decided it was time to install a robotic palletizing system. With this new system, the robot could now pick up those heavy 40 and 50-pound bags and place them on pallets. That solved their labor problem. And that's not all. It introduced what we like to think of as robotics' greatest strength, flexibility. Let's say Home Depot has different stack pattern preferences or height requirements than Lowe's. No problem. The operator just selects the right pattern on the controller and the robot knows what to do. Even better, they eventually added 2 stack stations, one on each side of the bag conveyor. So now they can run a standard order on one side and a rush order on the other, or stack 2 different patterns at the same time. All of that was possible because they used robotics, a flexible automation system. So when we talk about getting started with industrial robotics, the key word is flexibility. Let's take a minute to quickly review some key takeaways from this first section.
Welcome back to Automate Live. My name is Brian Heater. I am the managing editor of A3, and it is my honor to be here with award winner Stu Shepherd of Shepherd Solutions, of Fanuc, Universal Robotics, KUKA. Who am I forgetting? It's been
Goodle,
yeah,
and a couple of startups.
and a
as
couple
well.
of startups. Yeah, I mean, we were talking before, and you've been pretty much all the big players, it seems.
Quite a few of them. Yeah, I've had a great run of opportunities and leadership, and I even started out as a customer. So I started out at the very beginning of this whole thing as an end user of robots, which got me in robots in the first place. But yes, I followed suppliers and had fantastic opportunities, and it's been interesting to see the different approaches that each manufacturer uses to hit the marketplace, and I've learned a lot from that. But also, I think we've also helped a lot by helping those companies grow.
Yeah, it strikes me because I've been in journalism for 20 years, and the world of tech journalism, it's a fairly small place. People, maybe doesn't look like it from the outside, but it sounds like your world is like that too. So it kind of keeps you on your best behavior.
Yes, it does. Well, the joke is that you don't ever leave a company or leave the industry. You just get recycled into different roles. And it's really a case here. This very relationship oriented industry as a whole. It's a smaller industry than most people think. So you can only have one reputation. It better be a good one. So you have to be very cautious about how you conduct yourself to make sure you can be trustworthy. Trust is hard to earn, but easy to lose. So I've always maintained, keep trying to do the right thing for right people, and good things will happen. But yeah, it's a very, very small industry. We all know each other. And even as competitors, we may fight during the day, but we'll be out at the happy hours afterwards, having a beer or two.
You were saying earlier, yeah, and we don't need to mention names, but you were discussing two of the large companies and the fact that one side of the business, they're competitors, and the other side, they're actually working in tandem.
Well, friendships transcend competition. So you can have friendly competition, and as long as everybody's playing above board and doing it honestly, it's great. And frankly, competition makes you stronger.
Yeah.
And it's really been a great run. And if you're truly a good friend, you're going to be friends for life, regardless of who you're working for, because friendships and companies are two different things sometimes. And it doesn't mean you don't sometimes even cooperate. There's been times when one company will actually purchase the equipment from another company and combine them on site. And some of these opportunities we work on are so big that no one company can provide everything. So there's places where you actually wind up working together on control systems and other things because we're all connected at some way or another. So that makes it interesting and fun as well.
Yeah, it sounds like throughout your career you've had a bit of serendipity as well as a lot of you go into what may seem like a casual conversation, and you come out the other side the CEO of the company.
Yeah, it's happened twice. So. Yeah, but part of that's keeping your eyes and ears open. And if you're always providing value and you're looking forward and not just paying attention to what's in the rearview mirror, then you see opportunities.
Yeah.
And if people recognize that you're open to ideas, and they'll share ideas, and you collaborate until you find a win-win solution that suits everybody's needs. And I will admit there's times I've been opportunistic. I mean, you have to be alive in this marketplace. But I've tried to make choices that had long-term sustainability, because once you commit that you're going to do something for a company, it's not a short-term commitment. You're not in there for 90 days or 3 years to flip the company. You're in there to create a perpetual enterprise that you want to continue to grow over time. So your approach is different when you're playing the long ball versus playing just short hits.
Yeah, it's interesting as well. You alluded to this a little bit, but some of the differences between competitors that are essentially doing the same thing. And I assume, especially in a case if it's not a U.S. company, if it's initially a Chinese company, you come in, you have to learn the culture and then figure out what it is that makes that company tick.
Right. And sometimes the companies would arguably look the same, but you have to focus on what is it that the customer really needs and why are they doing automation in the first place.
And what's special about
what's
this
your
company?
secret sauce that helps you address that. And every company has a specialty. Every company has something that makes them unique. If they recognize that, that's great. Sometimes they don't recognize that, or sometimes the customer doesn't recognize what that is. So in some cases, and I'll use KUKA's as the example, we weren't always competing against robot companies. We were competing against other kinds of automation. Like in the entertainment business, we were competing against roller coasters. Well, we did a robo coaster, a very different technology, but we were able to provide value that the other guys couldn't, and then we won the business. And likewise in aerospace. When we first started doing carbon fiber, using KUKA robots for laying carbon fiber, we had discovered that our robots were more accurate, more precise than the other robots in the marketplace. And we were open to making changes in the controls that were necessary to implement the systems that were being asked for by the Boeings, the Lockheed Martins, and the others that were out there. So it was truly a collaboration with the customer, and together we discovered what made one company unique over another, and then everybody leveraged that to make it work.
Something that's really sunk in since I started going to this show, one, obviously because it's automation, but two, when it's in Detroit in particular, is just how far ahead the automotive industry is when it comes to adopting automation. I mean, we're talking like 60s for some of these early robots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and in the early days, it was only automotive that were doing robots. Now you can see every niche in the world that's using robots. And I was having this conversation with a cab driver on the way down here this morning. A lot of people don't realize when they're actually involved with robots that they're actually taking advantage of the benefits of robots because they don't recognize what robots necessarily look like. Many people think that they're like Star Wars, R2D2 and CP3O and all the other ones that we've seen in the movies, but they're really not. And sometimes it's very subtle. So at rock concerts, there'll be robots handling vision systems and lighting and screens and all kinds of things. And people don't realize those are robots. Entertainment ride systems, they don't realize they're actually riding on a robot. The CyberKnife surgical robot is, yes, a robot, but it's doing gamma radiation. Patients don't even know it because they're sedated. So there's a lot of different places where they don't realize that they've been enhanced by robot technology. And even the warehouse operations, the Amazons and the Walmarts and all that, most people have no idea how many robots are actually inside those warehouses now. So it's reached out to many more markets. What's exciting about this show is you can see how many more markets are starting to recognize the value of not just robots, but the other associated automation that it takes to solve problems.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and I wonder if the perception will change or evolve, depending on the success of like humanoid robots, for example, because those look like the movie robots.
Yeah, they do. And there's a lot of hype around humanoid robots, but a humanoid robot has a form factor that may not necessarily be economical. It may not work for a particular case, but the idea is okay. So how do you take the learnings from that to apply to something that does in fact work and solve a problem? And the challenge with humanoids today is that a lot of the technology, a lot of the work that it takes just to make the humanoid move consumes a lot of power that takes away from what it can do for people. So Joe Engelberger, who received the award from under his name last night, he devoted the latter part of his life to the service robot industry and the idea of how can we help with elder care and places where robots can be useful to extend the quality of life for older people. Because as you get old and less mobile and need more help, it's very difficult, not only on the patient, on the person,
But
also on the
also more people are choosing to live at home.
Exactly.
And the population is just getting older decade by decade.
So the savings of being in home is significant. But likewise, the healthcare buildings, the facilities are not designed for automation. So at this point, we had to introduce automation to construction and architecture type people to help them understand what can be done, because the analog to the home care and healthcare industry is that in the early days of the robotics industry for automotive, we couldn't just retrofit the plants the way they were. We had to make substantial changes. Today's automotive plants look dramatically different than what they did back in the 60s and 70s when robots were first introduced. We have to have that same kind of a design for use approach in the healthcare industry as well to be able to implement automation in a useful way without wasting a ton of money.
So would you say that age tech is one of your major passions right now?
So it's growing and it's evolving. So we've already seen the huge penetration regarding like endosurgery and even development of drugs and these types of things. There's a lot of robotic automation and drug discovery and drug testing and other things. So we're seeing it happen at the equipment level. But I believe that the launch point for healthcare in general is a combined effort between the use case of what do you want to try to accomplish, but designing facilities and automation to come together in that particular environment. And yes, that's a massive opportunity. Just the savings of keeping people at home longer is great, but also people are living significantly longer. So the need for healthcare is now extended longer and more difficult in that last few
Yeah.
years of life. So how can we address that? Because it's also very hard to be a healthcare giver at that age because the patient's needs are so extreme compared
Yeah.
to a healthy younger person.
Yeah, one of the things I appreciate about a show like this is there's a lot of conversations around safety,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
obviously it's always been a big part of what you do. But you know, most, if not all, of these big industrial arms are
Yeah.
caged in cells. We're talking about humanoids and AMRs interacting with people. But even beyond that, if we're talking about robots in the home, the two groups of people always point to are older people and children. So
Children, right.
safety really needs to be a focus moving
Well,
forward.
and we actually hold robots to a higher degree of standards from safety than we hold human beings to.
Yeah.
You know, if a robot steps on a child's foot, it's a catastrophe.
That's kind of what's keeping self-driving cars
Oh yeah.
back.
So you know, the risk of litigation is one of the biggest risks on the robot industry. You could lose your whole company because of an accident.
Yeah.
And I agree with that, frankly. But there's actions you can do. There's risk assessments and other things that we've developed in the A3 that are starting to be applied outside the industrial environment. So with the right assessments, the right tools, and the right technology that's available here at the show, you can in fact make robots safe to be around people. But the industry has to evolve. There has to be standards for a home, you know, for being able to put robots in a home, just like there's standards for buildings for factory automation. It has to be for the home. There has to be standards adjusted for the non-industrial environment and the disruptions that occur. Because you also have to worry not only about the person, but pets that show up and jump and everything. Like my grand dogs, as I call them, will jump on me instantly. What happens when a robot is jumped on by a dog? What happens?
Yeah.
So all of these things have to be worked on, and it has to be part of that risk assessment of how do you manage that space.
So one thing I really wanted to talk about before we're out of time is the 1980s. Automotive manufacturing in the 1980s.
Yeah.
I mean, you were there. Obviously, a lot of these conversations that we're still having about offshoring were happening back then, you know, and at the time, the impression that I get at the time, it was really a race with like Japan.
Yeah.
What was it like working in that environment? I mean, it must have been intense.
It was great. I had some fantastic mentors. I happened to be a co-op student at General Motors and was assigned into an automation group very early in the game. And the difference between then and now, the biggest thing is we designed everything from scratch. I mean, everything when it first started was actually still on a drafting board. CAD systems were just starting to come out, and CAD certainly made it much easier. But today, a lot of things we designed from scratch are available off the shelf. You can buy them today. You can buy complete systems today. There weren't as many systems integrators then as there were now. So one of the reasons it was only automotives that did this is they had the highest use case and the greatest degree of standardization and biggest volume. What's different about today is to be able to automate a company, you have to be able to deal extremely low volume and very, very high mix of product. It's not like you're only building a Cadillac, you know, you're building all kinds of different things. So the challenge gets to be is the flexibility requirements and software requirements are significantly higher. And those didn't exist in the 80s. So we had to keep it simple. And I look at it very much to like building cars. There was a point in time to build a car, you bought a chassis, you bought an engine, and you maybe assembled it yourself. Henry Ford, with the introduction of the Model T, started doing assemblies and selling them, and it's evolved from there.
PCs were very similar as well.
PCs are the same way. You used to buy bits and pieces and put them together. Then Dell, you know, put together packages. And now you can buy PCs like off your laptop or off your cell phone and deliver it in a couple of days. So the path for automation in general is going very much like those, but the difference is it's going much faster. The rate of change of automation coming in the marketplace is 10 to 20 times faster than what we've seen in the past. So I'm super excited about what's coming because you can almost feel it, you can taste it. The challenge I see is there's a lot of automation that's available today that's useful today that people aren't using, and I'm still trying to understand why. And so there's two different challenges. One is how do we get people to make better utilization of what's here today? And then how fast can we get to what's next? And both those will be challenges forever.
Yeah, the pandemic was undoubtedly an accelerant for the robotics industry, certainly for like fulfillment. It was in warehouses. And I've been discussing the past 6 months with a lot of people, you know, and avoiding certain words, but I'm curious, and we've only got about a minute left, but I'm curious, what the next 5 years look like. You know, that obviously people have been talking about reshoring for a long time.
Right.
They really did during the pandemic, and for other reasons, they're talking about it now.
Yeah. So the challenge with reshoring in general is there's some jobs, frankly, you don't want to reshore. The other thing is it takes a long time to do it. So a political situation that only lasts for a couple of years is much different than building a plant. Even the most modern plants like Tesla, 5 years, you know, to build that. And there was a lot of planning that took before all that got going.
Yeah, and NUMMI was actually there already. So
Right,
they were,
exactly. We retrofit an existing plant. So the challenge is how do we get things going today? Because there's things you should do today. It has nothing to do with tariffs. Just go and get it done. Stop worrying about it. But going forward on the other things that are going on out there, I see a convergence of technologies coming together, make it easy. And the key is keep challenging, keep asking the questions. And don't say, why can't we do this? Is how can we do this? And flip the mindset to a solutions orientation instead of, I can't do it.
Yeah. Well, Stu, unfortunately, we're just about out of time right now, but congratulations.
Thank you.
I could tell that you really felt that award, that was a very emotional moment for you. And it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Brian.
Much.
Thanks very much. Great to see you. Thank you. In Christmas 1967, I got a toy robot, and it was a lot of fun. We got a lot of mileage out of it, but over time we started having problems with it breaking down. Frequently had to fix it to keep it alive. So I started learning at an early age what reliability and durability was and how to fix things. Pretty early on, I'd made a decision that I was going to go to university for an education in engineering and other types of design sciences. My very first big assignment showed up in a bag of parts, and it was a brown bag, and it had a bunch of parts that we had to figure out how to assemble those parts. So I got introduced to FANUC at that particular point in time. They had two engineers that came and joined us in this room, and we spread the parts out on the table. We sat down and figured out what was the sequence of operations for putting it together. What were the constraints and what might work, what might not work. That project was fascinating, everything from design to build to installation in the plant. I had not considered a career in sales, and I was uncomfortable with it at first, but I thought it was an interesting opportunity. At first, the business was only with General Motors and General Motors clients. I wound up quickly having to go into business development and work with companies that were outside of the General Motors family. The challenge with going to non-automotive companies to talk about robots is everybody at that point in time thought that robots were a fad. They really didn't think robots could apply in their business. My career at KUKA was the most dynamic from a leadership and market diversity perspectives, which included aero, architecture, automotive, entertainment, and the introduction of the world's first collaborative robot. At Google, I had the broadest responsibilities of my career, including leading sales, local manufacturing, integration, and long-term support.
I'll never forget the phone call we had in January 2019 to start the Vectis Universal Robot cobalt welding relationship that ended up being a huge success and really created a new segment around cobalt welding that's so prolific today.
Your leadership and vision have been absolutely instrumental in VersaBuilt's success. You pushed the boundaries of robotics and inspired all of us with your dedication. This recognition is so well deserved.
I've been fortunate to have a lot of roles in the robotics industry, and none of those roles would be successful without being able to build great teams. And part of building great teams is to establish a shared vision amongst the people that are in the team about what does good look like, what does success look like, what does it feel like. So I've done what I could to help people find their way, and granted some of it's somewhat self-serving because I wanted to have a high-performing team. But the other thing is I discovered that the more you invest in people and the more you can help them build their capabilities and build their career, the payoff is there many times over, not just for the company, but for them and for others. I enjoy the work that we do at Shepherd Solutions.
Hey Jeritt, I wanted to find a special way to congratulate you on winning the A3 Educator of the Year award. So I had to find some time when you weren't around, super late at night, and put together this little program just to say, congratulations again, man. You truly, truly deserve the award.
Hi, Mr. Williams. Congratulations on your A3 Educator of the Year award. I couldn't think of a more deserving professor for this award. I just want to thank you for all the work that you have put into me and to all of your students. We appreciate you so much, and congratulations.
Hey, Jeritt, congratulations on the Educator Award. Thanks for your continued partnership in the innovation in robotics education.
You've been a huge inspiration to a lot of our kids and us, so keep doing what you're doing. You're killing it.
Thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
Hello, Dr. Jeritt Williams. Congratulations on being named A3's Educator of the Year for 2025. I just want to take a moment to thank you for being such an incredible mentor and leader. Your willingness to help, your knowledge, and your flexibility have really made an impact on all of us, both locally and globally. You challenge your students to learn real-world technology and prepare them for careers in robotics, and that dedication is truly inspiring. You're always supportive, reliable, and innovative. Thank you for everything you do, and congratulations once again.
With A3, the Association for Advancing Automation, and we're excited to be back here with some awesome guests. I have Dr. Jeritt Williams, the Assistant Professor of Engineering Technology from Illinois State. He is actually our Educator of the Year, so just nominated, and we're really, really excited to have him here. And also with me, we have Amanda Beaton with Siemens. She's the Program Manager over Siemens Cooperates with Education. And we are so thrilled to have both these people. Siemens has been a huge sponsor with our education initiatives we've been doing here at Automate. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, we have an Automate Education Pavilion. We had a student challenge going on this week. We had our Educator of the Year, and that's something they were also sponsoring. And so with that honor, because of all that you've done with us and our appreciation, I'll let you kick off the first question with Dr. Williams.
All right. Congrats, Dr. Williams.
Thank you.
What does it mean to be named Educator of the Year?
You know, it hasn't like fully sunk in, even though we're here. You know, it's just so much going on that maybe in a few days when things cool off a little bit, I'll say, wow, you know, this is what it really means. But just learning since I was nominated that I was among, you know, a few finalists who were amazing, that I was even considered to be a part of these terrific educators has meant a lot to me. You know, I've had some conversations with last year's winner, Danny Murphy, who's an amazing automation educator. Just this morning, he sent me a text as like, hey, congratulations, good luck, you got this, you know, sort of thing. And I really appreciate that everything that Siemens has done for educators and A3 is doing, you know, to invite educators to a real world industry partnership like this. So this has been great. So I'm really looking forward to the next year.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you. Like I said, we are honored to have you, and you had some tough competition. So, you know, it was a hard lineup to choose between, but we are super honored to have you. So you teach some of the most hands-on courses, you know, in your Department of Tech, you know, everything from robotics, automation, power systems. You know, as a teacher myself, I'm just curious, you know, what's your approach to making these topics come alive for the students? You know, that thing of just taking a title or a course name or something. How do you like make this something that the kids just like eat and breathe?
Sure. So, you know, Illinois State University has the unique advantage of having this space called the Caterpillar Integrated Manufacturing Lab.
Okay.
And we have industrial robots, we have PLCs, we have vision systems, conveyors. I mean, it looks like a miniature version of the space we're in right now.
Oh, cool.
So that makes my job a lot easier in a lot of ways. But I also have a huge responsibility of saying I have all this real industrial stuff. I'm going to partner with industrial partners, workforce partners in you know, Central Illinois, where we're located and beyond, to do real activities with students. So you're right, hands-on is a key for our program. You know, I want students to leave with, you know, they're not going to have every skill that they need, but they're going to be ready to take on the skills and challenges in their job. So I would say that, you know, to any educator who maybe doesn't have that start, that you're not out of the water. You know, there's a lot of opportunity to still get involved with automation technology, you know, in different ways. So you don't have to have that, but you know, we're just very fortunate that we have that as a start, and I feel like a strong pull to do those kinds of activities, hands-on and you know, partner with industry.
Awesome.
So I knew Dr. Williams loved teaching when I met him, and he pulled out his phone and said, "Do you want to see my lab?" And I said, "Sure." But what's the one moment that you always go back to that reminds you that you love teaching?
So I've joked with a few other teachers, and they feel the same way about this, but I still get really excited sort of through the student when the first time they press a button and it turns on a light or turns on a motor, you know, or makes a sound or something like that. And I may over exaggerate a little bit and kind of jump around and platform and things, but it's that feeling of, hey, I did this. Like I programmed automation. I used,
aha
yeah,
moment, right?
exactly. So those are kind of the day to day in the moment things. It's hard though sometimes as a teacher. We all know this to recognize when you've maybe made a difference or made an impact. I always kind of joke that our return on investment is uncertain. It's a long return sometimes. But you'll get, when if I hop on LinkedIn and I see students got a promotion or they're working in a job that it would be like my dream job if I were them,
I was a little jealous. Right?
or maybe they send me a note to say, hey, thanks. And I'm like, who sent this? Oh, this is not a person I expected to. I didn't think they really got much out of it. But those are kind of the important moments. And I would say something that I've tried to do to help me understand like what's going on now in my classroom is I ask students to write like an executive summary of what they did in my course at the end of the class. And it's not so much to say, oh, I love this class or I hated this class or whatever the case may be. It's so that it's kind of two things. One, they can start thinking about their resume. They can write down, we used, this type of PLC and did this type of programming or worked with these robots to do these applications and so on. But then also provide them some other self-reflection about, what was the problem that you had to overcome? Because that's like a job interview question, right? Tell me about a time that you had to solve a problem, and they do that in their coursework and things like that. So
it's kind of a hidden way of getting them.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
Get that,
and so I learned a lot from that, and so I'm kind of riding high on that right now because we just wrapped up for the semester, and I'm reading some of those, and I'm like, all right, they showed they really learned something, and that they've got a really bright future. So that gets me excited.
Well, I know, again, as a former educator, you talked about that idea of you don't always get that payoff. Someone once told me that thing about that you plant the seed and you don't always get to sit under the tree because, you don't know what the future holds with
That's
it.
a good way to put it.
But I like that you've seen that, rewarding part. You've seen the product, if you will. So congratulations on that. Kind of shifting a little bit, you've helped design some new curricula, including sustainability-focused STEM courses and VR-based robotics. What drives your innovation in thinking up these new things? I know you maybe alluded to you're trying to see what's going on out there, but what things help you to think, I've got the next great course idea?
Well, obviously I want to stay relevant to what's going on in the industry. As you walk around, the Automate show floor, you see, digital twins, you see simulation, you see mobile robotic. I mean, everything, right? Vision systems, you name it. Part of me is, I love to learn. I think learning is a really important part of teaching. And so, one thing I do is I walk around and think like, what is something I don't know about? Because if I can get excited about learning that, I can learn with my students and along with them and really let them know that we're learning this together. You have to have a passion for learning new things. You won't know everything. Yeah. And I think that can make this world a little bit intimidating is like, I could never do this because it's just too much. Like, how do you even get started, right? And it's like, well, you pick one thing and you sit down and you try to learn about it. And then also I'm a little restless maybe with things, I heard some stat one time that, a lot of teachers aren't, A students, like the best and the brightest, like they're maybe middle of the road. I myself was probably a B or C student, but I was a curious person, a little restless at times and, fidgety and have a little bit of energy. So I just try to channel that in a way that is productive. So, learning about the next best thing and it works itself out a lot of times. And then, I've also been fortunate, you mentioned like sustainability, that at Illinois State, we have some different majors, different programs. One focuses on sustainable and renewable energy. And I've got to work with those faculty as well. So that's given us a lot of opportunities. And I think it fits really well within the types of, initiatives and workforce initiatives that we'll see now and in the future.
Awesome.
All right. We talked about robots, cobots, PLCs, HMIs, lots of stuff yesterday, but tell us about one of your very favorite projects.
So that's kind of a tough one to narrow down. I would say that when you look at sort of all the projects that we've done, a lot of times students will come up with the idea and we'll say, all right, let's make it happen. And they'll say, well, I don't know how to do it. And I'll say, that's fine. I don't either. That's why we, that's why we do this stuff. But they usually like zero in on food. So one of my favorite recent projects was one of my longtime mentors and faculty colleagues was retiring. And so he had said sort of in jest, I'd like to have a robot serve the cake at my retirement. And so I said, all right. I didn't say it out loud. I was like, yeah, we'll do that. We'll make that happen. So we went through a lot of cakes to get it right. But at the end of the day, and students helped build this. We had to do it all very covertly, right behind the scenes. But at the end of the day, we had a robot serving cake at his retirement. So that was a fun project, among many others. Too many to think about.
It's always hard picking a favorite.
Yeah,
right?
sure.
You can't have a favorite student, right?
Recent memory.
So your work, you do some stuff in after-school STEM programs, especially with underrepresented communities, and that's something that I think inspires all of us. Again, even as a former educator, that's something that I can relate to, and I appreciate that work. But what are you learning about equity and access to these programs? I know you even maybe touched on it before, like when you compare schools to schools, not every school has an amazing lab, right? So just what are your insights on some of that stuff?
Yeah, so thank you for that question. I'm very fortunate that I work on a National Science Foundation project right now called Supercharge, which long acronym, but I'll try to nail it here. STEM-based university pathways, encouraging relationships with Chicago high schools in automation, robotics, and green energy. So there's that sustainability piece. We have an interdisciplinary team, but we do things in underserved areas, schools that may not have robotics or computer science programs. But we're working with them to help them kind of see some of the fundamentals, do hands-on projects after school in an informal setting, but also work on projects that are relevant to their communities. So we want to let them know that there's a pathway for them in education, but also, future careers that will impact their own communities. And like you mentioned, the equity piece it's really important to me to show students that, I didn't start out in this. This wasn't my first direction in my career.
Sure.
I sort of came into this, and because I was curious about this stuff, and because I had people telling me that, you may not see things in yourself that others do,
right?
But I think you have a lot of potential. If you like this, go for it.
Yeah.
And so, I'm trying to give back in that way a little bit. Trying to move that forward, pay it forward.
Oh, and that's a perfect segue. We just got a few minutes left. So, maybe one thing that we'll wrap up on is, you may be aware we've got our next gen student tours going on today. We've got over 1,000 students that are hitting the Automate show floor, ranging from middle school on up. So, you talk about just like what maybe if you were to give a piece of parting advice or just something to kind of inspire the next generation, knowing that they may not all choose this industry, right? But just thinking broadly, what would you say to them? And maybe that's how we'll wrap up.
Sure. I think I say this to not only my students, but I'm going to dangerously speak on behalf of my fellow educators in that, we appreciate the challenges that students give us. Now, in the moment, it can be a little tough sometimes, get a little frustrated, we're not thinking about it. When we look back, when students challenge me, when the students challenge us, it helps us be better, helps us think about, how can we learn more? How can we get more resources to provide our students new opportunities and things like that? So, thank you to students for challenging us as educators would be one thing I would say. And then the other piece of it is, maybe that advice I was given early in my career that, you may not see something in yourself right now,
right?
But somebody does. Your teacher sees it, your family sees it. We know that, I don't want to sound like professor too much here, but research tells us that,
right.
Your teachers, your family, your friends, people that that work in and around this kind of industry are like the biggest influences on students to go into this. So, ask a teacher, how you can get involved in this stuff, or ask if they know anybody in industry that could partner with them, because I know that's what a lot of industry partners want to do. We know that the workforce needs next generation. And like students are the next generation.
Yeah.
So, and start at as early age as possible. So.
And I think you see that here. We've got, you're clearly a believer in hands-on and experiential learning. So I think this is an example of that, right? What better way to get kids out and to see something literally in some of these booths, get their hands on, but to experience the industry and experience potential jobs. I think it's awesome. And we, again, applaud you for all the work that you've been doing. Want to thank Amanda again for all of your work toward this, your sponsorship, and just being behind us every step of the way. And
happy to be a part of it.
Yeah. And we can't do it without educators like you. So thank you again and congratulations. This is very well deserved. So
thank you.
To our audience out there, again, we thank everyone for watching, and we'll be back in a few minutes.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger, every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Las Vegas, a a new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.
Hello and welcome back. Again, we're here at our last day of Automate. For those of you who have been tuning in live, you're stuck with me again, Josh Ebert from A3 Association for Advancing Automation. I'm our Curriculum Development Manager, but I've got a new face here with me. Our crew has switched out, and I'm here with Sarah Jones from the REC Foundation. Sarah, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and the foundation?
Yeah, so I've actually been in the world of robotics since 2014. Transitioned over to the REC Foundation in 2021.
Okay.
And I just actually transitioned over to a new role. We are now going to have me as a senior program manager for workforce development.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And I understand you're also a former educator, right? Just like me. So...
I am. Started in education in high school mathematics.
Oh, wow. And so at least there's some connection, right? We're always talking about STEM in this field. I can see you got
Absolutely.
the M covered, right?
Yes, yes.
So I've got to brag, I'm really coming off from a high here because I actually just got in the day before leaving for Automate. I came in from Vex Worlds in Dallas, and that was actually my very first Vex Worlds that I ever got to see. So I had been aware of Vex. I had actually volunteered probably like 10 years ago and kind of been involved locally. Didn't honestly know a ton about it other than just friends that were involved with it, that kind of thing. But without getting into a long story here, basically had this opportunity to see it firsthand and got the VIP experience, which is super cool. But I was seriously blown away. I cannot emphasize enough as a former educator, just seeing these students full of energy, excitement, tens of thousands of them packed into the dome there. It is just super cool. So I'm going to kind of leave this as an open-ended thing. Why don't you tell us, for those of you who maybe haven't seen it, what is Vex? What are you trying to do with that? How is it growing again from the little thing I saw to like this gigantic thing? So just, I'll open it up with that.
Absolutely, Josh. So that's actually the response that we get from most people when they experience their first worlds. They just say it's inspiring to see all of the students that are there, the conversations that's going on, the collaboration, the students getting excited, their enthusiasm. You can't help but just leave that place just excited yourself, seeing what's going on. So yeah, actually, Vex Worlds just finished up yesterday in Dallas. We will actually be moving on to a new city in St. Louis. That just was announced. So we will be seeing everyone in St. Louis next year, hopefully to see more, just to come check it out and see what we're about. But yeah, we actually have over 100 countries right now that are represented through Vex Robotics competitions.
So definitely international. This isn't just a US based thing, hence the worlds, right?
Absolutely, yes. It is definitely the Vex world. So we have, at any one point in time, over 60 countries that's represented at the World Championship. And so we get to see our students. The best thing about it is the students come up to us and they are excited because they were able to meet somebody from another country.
Yeah.
And so for a lot of these students, this is the very first time that maybe they've left their community, they've left their state, and they are actually able to go and they are able to experience someone else's culture right here with just robotics.
Sure. Yeah. No, I can relate. Again, as a teacher, I think that those kinds of contests and organizations were critical to the learning experience. It's that experiential learning for some of them, might have been their first time leaving their state or their county and getting that experience to interact with other people, like I said, other cultures, to travel. But I guess to maybe circle back, because I didn't set us up well here. Maybe for people listening, they don't know what Vex is. So what is the Vex contest? What are they doing here at Worlds? Let's give them a little overview and obviously how it connects to everything with automation.
Yes. So we actually have two different competitions there that's going. We have Vex IQ, which is for our elementary and middle school students.
Okay.
So at this age, they get to learn how to collaborate with one another. So it's not that they are competing against somebody. They're competing against time.
Okay.
They're trying to score as many points as they can with another robot or another team. So they have to learn beforehand, how do I go and connect with this team? How do I strategize? So we're working on those soft skills. I've been listening to everyone here. They talk about we need soft skills. These students are learning it. So they're able to work together to score as many points as possible. We move into the older age group, then we have middle school and high school students, and they are actually not just working with another team from somewhere else. They're having to work with that team to compete against two other teams that are trying to score points for their side. Right. So we have an alliance. Yeah. So blue against red. So it is, how do I still collaborate and learn how to work with somebody and talk about my strategies, and I have to know my strengths and weaknesses so that way I can communicate clearly with my alliance partner So we can come up with the best strategy then to make sure that our alliance, is going to come out on top.
Yeah, and I saw that firsthand. Again, you talk about those soft skills, those essential skills. Like, it is apparent. I mean, they get super, super competitive, but that was actually one of the things. Like, their sportsmanship, teamwork, right? All that kind of stuff that they're working on, and they're hiding it in this fun thing that the students want to do. Right? They are into this. They're like hungry. And in fact, we had a student challenge here, as you know.
Yes.
We were excited to host VEX for one of our student challenge days, and you saw it. Like, the crowd here at Automate was gathering around because they would hear the sound of these students just like, oh yeah, we're gonna do this, stack the ring, stack the ring, and so it's just exciting. There is that energy and that interest from the students that makes all the maybe more traditional STEM stuff just kind of hidden beneath the fun part, right?
Absolutely. Teaching math, I wish I would have had this in my math classroom because it would have made it so much more fun.
Yeah.
They want to know why we have to learn ratios. Well, we have gear ratios that we can relate
Right.
to and all of that. So it would have definitely, it's definitely a great support then for the classroom to teach the education that they need.
Okay. Was there anything else that you want to share about VEX maybe before I kind of queue up my next question I'm curious about?
Just that, we're creating enthusiasm, like you said. You saw the kids that they get excited, they're working with others. It's all about wanting to see each other succeed.
Yeah.
Yes, it is competitive, but if I'm going to be paired with you on my next,
I'd be sorry
match,
for you. That'd be very unfortunate for you. No.
if something is wrong with your robot, I want to jump in and help you. I want to see what can I do to help.
Yeah.
So we are creating that enthusiasm for students to learn how to work together, work with one another, strategize, and just collaborate on a bigger level.
Right. And I know we can all underscore that idea. We've heard 100 times from employers, from education, that idea of students being able to work together in their, their areas of work, at a company, on a factory floor. But it's nice that you guys are not just doing like the I don't know, the cliche teamwork. It's like you're actually applying teamwork in the field, right? It is, like you said, on solving a math problem, solving a science problem, solving this robotics automation problem. So that's an awesome connection there.
And it's learning, students are learning their strengths and weaknesses. So not everyone's designed to be a programmer. Not everyone's designed to be a driver or, a builder, but they have to come together and work together because, we see some students, they want to program.
Right.
So they program the robot the way they want it to be. And the driver picks up the remote and they're saying, well, this button is not doing what I think it should do. And so then they have to learn to work together of, hey, I'm left-handed, but you're right-handed and you programmed it for a right-handed person. I need to do this and work together.
Sure.
So they definitely learn how to work on each other's strengths and weaknesses.
Well, there's undoubtedly, again, a number of skills you guys are doing through this, which is phenomenal. So I'll maybe ask a challenging question. Do you see any payback on this? Are you seeing success from these students? Like, I saw it there, but like, what happens beyond once they graduate high school, assuming they're at the end of their high school career? Does what they get from VEX translate to something in the real world?
Absolutely, it does. So I've actually ran into a few former competitors here at Automate that are here in booths. They see the REC Foundation or they see the VEX and they say, "Oh my goodness, I grew up doing that, competing." We've also seen a few people here in booths say, "We support our local competitions. We help with it." So we do. We see students that are graduating that are taking what they learned through competitions, and then they're in this amazing world of automation and innovation.
Well, you alluded to that idea too, just of the idea that they may not just doing it directly in their employment, but that they're still involved with VEX. Because I love making up stats on the spot, but I know they said it there at the event. There was like, I want to say like 1,700 volunteers involved just to make this all happen. So it definitely seems kind of like a cycle, a cycle in terms of that community where the people that are in it come back, they give back, they're involved. So that's also just an awesome part, in terms of all those soft skills and community involvement.
It takes thousands to do what we do, and we could not do all of this without our volunteers.
Yeah. Well, I know that there's obviously more to REC than just these VEX competitions. So, you kind of already alluded to what you're doing to maybe help students in their skills, the upskilling, the workforce development. So, yeah, tell us just more. What else is there with the REC Foundation?
Yeah, so we work with educators. So even though we talk about the students that are competing, we primarily work with our educators.
Okay.
We want to provide them with the resources that they can use in their classroom. So even if it is just a competition, we're providing them with coach training. We're training them on how to incorporate this. We also have 2 industry certifications that they can use in their classroom.
Okay.
So these students that are learning all of these amazing skills and and soft skills, technical skills, they can then show that
Yeah.
through our industry certifications. We have 2 of them, like I said. We have a pre-engineering,
Okay.
and then they can choose the robotics. So robotics is just basically that the pre-engineering certification.
Okay.
They are choosing to do the electrical, the mechanical, and the computer science modules to
So
be
kind of
able
like
to
taking
show.
it a little further then.
It
basically.
is. It's taking it a little further. Where our pre-engineering, it definitely has modules that covers all of our foundations of engineering. So I mean, it's chemical, it's mechanical, electrical, architecture. So all of that included.
Well, that's awesome. We definitely hear about that constantly. Again, as a former educator, just also in our work here with A3, there's this demand for credentials, micro credentials, certifications. We're actually working on a bunch of our own. So it's awesome to begin to see ways that we're kind of formalizing these things, because I know it's a fair thing to be challenged with. That we shouldn't just say students are getting this, that, and the other. It's like, no, here is our formal curriculum. This is how all this awesome stuff translates into something that can be recognized by employers. And it sounds like, again, it is working. It's getting them connected to jobs and opportunities. So.
Yes, and then the good thing is we don't actually have a curriculum. We're just providing these educators with a certification. So they can choose, it's the stamp. So they can choose what curriculum they want to use in their classroom, and then show then that what their students are learning, that it does translate into a certification.
Gotcha. Well, again, we've talked a lot about K-12, but what would you say to someone maybe in the adult community, maybe someone who's graduated high school, maybe they're in college, are there other opportunities that you guys have? Is there ways they can get involved? What would you say to them?
Absolutely. So we do have competitions for our university level. So students that are deciding to go on to post-secondary school, they can definitely stay involved, get to a university that has a VexU competition, stay there. They can also be part of our alumni association. So give back, be a voice, help those growing communities grow into what they loved growing up as a competitor. We also have things that are outside of just the mobile robotics competition. So we do have the factory automation competition.
Tell me about that.
Classroom based. So you don't have to travel. So I know a lot of times educators are like, you have so many things on my plate and having to go to competitions. Whereas
halfway across the world, right?
Yes. With the factory automation competition, it actually uses a industrial arm along with the conveyor system. We use the Vex CTE
like a
work
six-axis
cell.
robot, essentially.
Yes, and it is a tabletop version. So it's not something that it is. It is a tabletop version that you can use in your classroom. There's definitely curriculum that's available that you can use, but we create a challenge then that after you have taught all the concepts for the students to learn how to program and work with it, that we encompass more than just the programming and the design. It's let's set it up as what this would look like in an industrial area, and how can we incorporate AI and all those other things that's going on in the world.
Big buzzwords.
Absolutely. So then it takes it from the fun mobile robot into what does this then correspond to with the real world.
And you said they don't have to travel for that, so I assume is that
Absolutely not. They
virtual or like
they just submit a video of what we have phases. So each phase gets a little bit more difficult. So phase 1 is, I know in education we talk about low floor, high ceiling. So that's kind of what our competition is designed around. Is phase 1 is very accessible to everyone. And then after you compete phase 1, you'll have to add on to it and add on to it. So it gets more and more difficult as you go.
That's super cool. I actually didn't know a lot about that. I've heard that term, but I hadn't understood the mechanics of that game. So now it's another one I'm going to check out and then get involved with. But we actually only have a few minutes left. So, I think maybe as a close out, you know that there's over 1,000 students on the floor here, lots of companies and businesses. Again, we've talked a little bit already about the K-12 side. So if you want to maybe give a word of advice to the students or whatever, that's awesome. But maybe the last thing I'd like you to think about is just what could you say to businesses, to industry? How do they get involved? What can they do aside from obviously hiring the students? We'd love that, but there's got to be some other way I'm sure they can get involved.
Absolutely. So if you're not already involved with your local school, this is a great opportunity for you to go and see what they're doing in the classroom, whether they're doing Vex Robotics or not. This is definitely your pipeline into your industry, into your business. So go and see what they're doing. Go volunteer. Bring the students on board, have them come and see what you're doing, create that awareness for these students so that way they know where they can possibly go once they're done, once they've graduated. And then also, I mean, we have ability to donate, to sponsor. We provide grants to communities that are getting started, schools. So there's lots of opportunities. You can definitely check out recf.org.
Yeah, and I can say when I was there was a lot of big name
yes,
sponsors. So it seems like there's a lot of industry
absolutely.
that's really behind this and believes in it. But
Yes, so start small and then let's see where we can go from there.
I think I cut you off. You were just starting to say too, where would they go? Where's the call to action? The domain, website, email you?
Absolutely, yes. You can go to recf.org. That is our website. You can also feel free to, email myself, Sarah_Jones at recf.org, and we can go from there. So it's all about getting started, maybe small in your community, at your school, maybe, or seeing how you can support it statewide. How can you provide funds to help more individuals get started, or sponsor Vex World?
Yeah, plug, right? Yeah, that's awesome. It is an amazing opportunity. Like I said, what I saw just blew my mind, and I'm excited to maybe get to go again. So I got to figure out how to work that in and make some time next year. But check in your location. So
yes, absolutely.
Well, we are almost out of time, so I'm gonna just quickly wrap up with a plug. But we appreciate everyone tuning in, and we'll be back here in a little bit. So thank you again, Sarah, for taking the time to be with us and all the work that you've done. Again, even with the Student Challenge and beyond. And I look forward to partnering more with everything we're doing with A3 and RECF. So
absolutely, thank you.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger. Every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Las Vegas, a new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.
Welcome back. My name is Brian Heater. I am the managing editor of A3, and I am here with some colleagues, like two of the top Alexes at the A3 organization. Alex Chicane, Alex Coleman. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
I'll start with you because the other day you caught me like running past and you asked me what I thought the trends of the show have been so far. So I'm going to flip the question and put it on you.
Yeah, we've seen some great things out there. It's been really interesting to see the diversity of technologies represented, and also how these technologies are starting to really come together and combine to make more than the sum of their parts. We've seen a lot of vision integrated with robots and these full stack solutions. I've been referring to them throughout the show, where it brings together all the moving parts under one booth or one umbrella. So it's really been interesting to see that all come together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of vision with robots, even more so than in recent years.
Interesting.
I mean, 3D vision, 2D vision, even
we had a company in the startup competition that does ultrasonic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sonair. Yeah.
Sonair, very cool.
Yeah, so there's a lot of that. Sensors, sensing technologies, things that help autonomous mobile robots or even humanoids and other automation sense their environments, that type of thing. I've noticed a lot of that here this week.
It's interesting, and it's one of those things. I just was speaking with Stu Shepherd before the two of you came on, and we were talking about vision as well. And it's one of those things that gets developed perhaps for a sector like this, but ultimately will affect like every part.
Yeah.
And on the flip side, all the work that's going into self-driving cars are also pushing the industry forward.
Yeah.
It's really fascinating, and that I think that's been a big trend for me. Is a lot of companies that are focused on a certain thing and have really just found that the market isn't quite what they expected and have kind of pivoted and filled their slot.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. It's really interesting to think about how the different form factors we have are going to continue to slot into the market as it expands, right?
Yeah.
Like you have some people who believe that you're going to need to be specialized, like for any given application, like Kinesi, who won the startup competition.
We're starting from a point of specialization or single purpose robots.
Right. And so some believe that that's the right approach. Others are charging ahead with the more generalist approach, right? We can create we should be able as an industry to create a humanoid or other form factor that is a jack of all trades, like a human being. You could drop them into any application and they could learn it or be trained on it. And so I think that's an interesting hypothetical to think about where we end up.
I think AI is really going to kind of underline that flexibility and that adaptability, whether it's as specialized as AI for vision models to make them a little more rugged and durable to weird edge cases, or like Alex was mentioning, dropping a robot into a scenario and redeploying it into another scenario, maybe throughout the working day.
Yeah.
Being able to use that same technology and that investment in more than one place, AI might help out with that.
So let's contrast last year and this year. I was at the event last year. Everybody was talking about humanoids. It was a big thing. Obviously, generative AI was a really big thing. Those two particular categories, how do you feel like that's changed in the past 12 or so months?
Yeah, so a lot has changed in just a year. We have more humanoids at this show than we had at the last show.
Okay.
Definitely. AI is pretty much present. I'm not going to say all. All is a lot. That's 100%. But a higher percentage of booths have some level of AI, either in the application or even in the product names, You see a lot of the company names, AI, .ai, but you also see a lot of products in booths that claim they have AI in them, right?
I was talking to somebody about this last night at the awards dinner, and there are companies that are changing their name to put AI in because there's a lot of money going into AI right now.
Yeah, we're going to change it. A big announcement. A3 is going to become AI
A4.
3.
A4.
Oh yeah, sure, that works.
Stick another. How about you? How have things changed in the last year?
Yeah, I think that's been one of the biggest trends that I've noticed is that you're seeing some of these technologies maybe ebb and flow and rise with the tides. The AI side, it's not just, I think, generative AI, but also AI being integrated into actual applications. I had talked about this a little bit. Yeah, in our keynote, agentic AI for quality control, AI seeing applications beyond just, I think, what a lot of maybe consumers or people that are just dipping a toe into AI, they're used to like the chatbot interface, but now it's AI powering and underlying a lot of the technologies that are out on the floor.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
kind of get deployed.
The expectations, especially around, Gen AI or LLMs, are huge because so many people who aren't in technology, I'm sure all of our parents have used like Chat GPT at one point,
Yeah.
and it feels like magic. And
Yeah.
to a certain extent, I feel like these companies' jobs, and really like your jobs as well, my job is kind of tempering expectations as far as what technology can actually do today.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some of that, but I can't help think downstairs we had the student challenge, all week. We have some 1,600 students or so, which is a multiple of what we had last year. Walking around, thinking about how those folks, when they get into industry, are going to interact, program the automation we see around us. I can't help but think it's natural language processing. It's them talking to the system, telling the system through some type of Alexa or Siri type of thing that goes into an AI backend that can interpret or execute from an agentic perspective. It's going to be like interacting with another human being to program. It's not going to necessarily be like on a teach pendant, moving the XYZ coordinates. There's a lot of that out there, movement training and things like that, where the system knows and can learn how to properly do applications, without program.
Yeah, that's particularly useful in like a factory setting or a warehouse setting. We're all talking about upskilling, and I think that's, A3 plays a role in that as well. But it's not just about educating, the next generation of roboticists or computer scientists. It's about people right now who have jobs, who need to learn to work with the robots. And you're almost talking about removing gatekeeping a little bit from that industry.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
think about it. If we're looking to reskill people, if we're talking about job displacement or the dull, dirty, and dangerous jobs that get displaced by automation, we need swim lanes or ways to get those people into the new roles that we know are being created. Robot technicians, right? You're right. It removes barriers if the training to get to a functional level or of doing those new roles can be done more easily. You don't have to go through a year of teach pendant training or some certification, right? Necessarily. You could do it in a much easier way with something that is broadly understood, like communicating with a
There will
GPT.
always be a role for the roboticist and the computer
Of
scientist.
course.
They'll just be working on whatever the next thing is.
Yeah, of course.
One of the things I see it colliding with is the whole idea of cobots, where if you have that flexibility to easily work with and communicate with the robot, cobots might be even more important going forward, where you are seeing that closer collaboration with the hardware and the software side.
This is super fascinating to me because I think it was Monday, I was speaking with an executive at ABB, and he was giving me the broad timeline. We introduced our first electric robot like 60 years ago, something like that. And then we introduced our first cobot in 2015. And I was like, that kind of goes against what you would imagine the projection to be, right? As things become more automated, they're more self-sufficient, they're more autonomous. But there really has been a big trend in the past like decade or so to move towards human-robot collaboration.
Yeah, absolutely. I call them 21st century tools a lot because I've met people who are working with robots now, and they are having a ball. They enjoy their job. It's very cool technology to operate, to program, to deploy in different ways. There's almost like a fun gamification element to those roles and the people that I've met. And so if you could raise the bar or raise the work environment to a clean, technology forward environment that's fun for people to work in, I think you stand to attract more people to your space. You inspire the youth a little bit better, bring them over from like the tech jobs, that we see. You're from TechCrunch, you know this well, right? You've seen that.
I've heard, this is very, very anecdotal, like second or third hand, but that Gen Z specifically, a lot of folks in that generation are interested in working with their hands, and are interested in a lot of these like jobs, in the factories, are going to trade schools, which is a perfectly, if that's what you want to do, that's great.
Yeah.
So there's definitely a big sort of transition happening within the industrial context.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little more broadly to a point that you were making earlier, I think the pace of change is accelerating. Like you said, 60 years from one point to another.
Yeah.
But then in your previous question, you had just mentioned, what have you seen change from last year's show? And I made a comment in our keynote talking about AI where I said, looking at the long term of AI, the next 6 months,
It's true.
kind of all of
Yeah.
these things are accelerating more rapidly than ever. And so I think it's great to be able to walk the show floor, see these developments, talk with the people shaping them, and, really get a finger on the pulse of what's changing, because it is changing so quickly.
Yeah, and the only thing I think with a shorter timeline is tariffs right now, as far as things changing from day to day, which, well, we won't get super into the politics of things, but obviously, what's been happening now, these conversations about nearshoring or reshoring, been happening for decades. Obviously, a lot of that accelerated during the pandemic, but this past 6 months in particular, folks are really talking about bringing manufacturing back to the U.S. as much as possible.
Yeah, and the uncertainty is quantifiable. So the Economic Policy Uncertainty Index is a metric that the National Bureau of Economic Research tracks. And you can actually see on that graph that uncertainty in today's economic policy, around today's economic policy, is higher than it was when COVID first started. That's quantifiable in terms of how that index tracks it. Highest in decades, frankly. So even despite that, we saw slightly positive sales performance in the first quarter for the robotics market in North America. And so as you walk the show, what I'm hearing is this same story. People don't know. The ground is shifting below our feet, but people don't really seem to believe that that's going to last for too long. They think it's more tactical, to a means to an end type of situation, and it's some interval of time between now and probably mid-year we're going to have some more certainty around some of these key markets, and then things are expected to really take...
I was speaking to an analyst right here yesterday about the tariff thing, and we sat down and he said, the one thing I really want to talk about is uncertainty. And I pulled my iPad and I showed it was like the first bullet point on there. And that's really what it is. I think in a lot of ways, the uncertainty is the most difficult part for folks right now.
Yeah, that's understandable. I mean, there's 400,000 plus manufacturing jobs open that, against a low quit rate and rising manufacturing wages. So it's one of those things where when you have that workforce, you need to give them the tools they need to do their job as effectively as possible, to be a force multiplier for the manufacturing workforce you do have, and want to continue to grow with employee training, upskilling, all of those areas. So I think there is a lot of uncertainty out there, and it's tough to necessarily make those capital investments right now for automation technology or any capital investments really. But when you do, I think you're finding that it really is offering benefits.
One of the more interesting conversations I had on the floor yesterday was with the Arduino folks, and Arduino has had a really interesting pivot from hobbyists to they're actually like making boards for manufacturing, because they realized the thing that Apple realized, 40 or so years ago, which is if you want people to use their product at different points during your career, you build it into education. And it seems like education has been a really big part of the A3 mission as well.
Yeah, it's a huge part. I mean, the amount of educators we have this year around that student competition just engaged in the show. I mentioned the amount of students here relative to last year. I mean, it is growing so quickly. And to your point earlier, you brought up technical schools, you brought up associate degrees, these alternatives to 4-year collegiate education, right? We need that that's a gap in the workforce right now. And so, yeah, we at A3 are thrilled to be engaging more of these schools, more of these educators. And I think you're only going to see this continue as we get into next year's Chicago show. As you go into 2027, this is going to be a growing component of, I believe, what we do here at Automate, for sure.
So we got a little less than a minute, so I'll put this to you. It could go either one of you. It seems like increasingly, and this is a great thing, safety is really becoming an integral part of that conversation.
Yeah, I think it's always been a focus. I mean, I know I can't speak authoritatively on it, but A3's had such a role in developing and designing these safety standards, partnering with these companies to make sure they're integrated, because it's just a fundamental part. You can't have effective automation without effective safety. And so I know that we've got some new standards. I hope you've had a chance to speak with our safeties and standards people about them, but yeah, it's going to be a focus going forward. One thing that I think is interesting will be the idea of safety around AI, where being a little less deterministic than, an XY move on a robot, and instead the output of an AI system. That'll be an interesting area to explore going forward.
Awesome. Well, Alex, thank you so much. I think I'm staying in this seat right now. Coming up next is my last interview of, I guess, the entire show. I'm speaking to the founder of Kinesi Robots, the winner of our recent competition. So stay tuned for that.
Awesome.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger, every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Las Vegas, a new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.
Welcome back to Automate Live. It's bittersweet to tell you, but this is going to be our last Automate Live, unless something happens for the show. It's been great. I've had some really fascinating conversations, and these conversations are going to stay online for posterity as well. If you missed anything, I want to go back and watch. One of the most exciting things, our little booth is over there, and the entire week I was sitting there with a very large blank check. We had the startup competition. I'm coming from startup land myself, so it's really great, and it was such an incredible selection of companies. Going through yesterday and talking to everybody, I'm very impressed. But you were Brent Pierce and Kinesi Robots. You were the cream of the top of the cream.
Why, thank you, Brian. Yes. It's great to win, especially when I watched everyone else's pitches. There were so many great companies there being represented.
You were like, "There's no way."
It was like there's a couple of companies that I'm like, surely they have it because they had such great products, and it's just great to be selected.
Yeah, you and I were talking yesterday, and we were talking about a lot of the kind of like macro trends that I've been talking to people about. Humanoids, obviously, everybody's talking about it. And one of the trends that I've been noticing, and I think this does apply to you, is that everybody rushed into legs, right? There was a lot of money going in, so everyone went full stack. And now there's been, I don't want to say regression, but now people are realizing, oh, like maybe there is kind of a nice, there's a place that exists between AMRs and humanoids. And you're kind of right in there.
Yeah, so I should also say I spent 10 years doing a PhD in humanoid robotics, specialty in legs. I love humanoids. I really want to build a humanoid robot at one point in my life. But when I look at the problems we're trying to solve, it's very much still in the early stages of how do you actually take an AI model from the labs and actually take it to the real world. And from my opinion of starting multiple companies, it's like, why overcomplicate it? Most of the tasks we're looking at is, can you drive to a box? Can you drive to a part in an assembly line? Can you pick it up? Can you slot it into a racking? Can you put it onto a pallet? Most of the places we've gone and visited, they're flat floors. Why have legs? Why overcomplicate it? Especially when it's so hard to bring new technology to customers. Why overcomplicate your startup? Because it's hard enough as it is.
Yeah, that said, it is companies like you that are overcomplicating the definition of humanoid right now. You're obviously like kind of testing the edges, but I do appreciate that. I obviously understand the benefits of being shaped and being the same size as a person, but it's really interesting to see now how people are kind of supporting or exploring the outer reaches of what can constitute a humanoid robot.
Yeah, I think where humanoids would probably be more what we say is like legged humanoids, if there's uneven ground, if you're outside, if it's got narrow spaces. But most of the pilots we're talking to, they're designed to have like sack trucks. They're designed already to have AMRs moving around. That's where, from my previous company, Bear Robotics, I've got 10 years experience of building AMRs. It also helps me personally, the fact that I can use the technology and the AMR from my previous company to build on top of. So I don't have to worry about, mapping the world, making a navigation stack, and these sorts of technology I can actually just use because it's a bit of a commodity now. So we also just combine cobot arms with an AMR base, so we can really as a company just focus on what we want to focus on now, which is actually, can we take a foundational model, i.e. can a human operator using VR train the robot to do a task, and not only train it, and I think this is the key from my experience, is you see academia, they're like, oh, this works 90% of the time.
Yeah.
A customer doesn't want that. They want 99.9%. Amazon doesn't care that their parcel goes out 90% of the time. They're like, it has to get delivered. And that's where I see the same technology wave that I did like 10, 15 years ago, when you were bringing the new technology of SLAM out of academia into the warehouses. So you don't need strips. And there it took, my previous company is now 8 years old. We still have 200 engineers just working on old-fashioned control system and slabs. So it takes a long time to take something that works in a lab and make sure that you can just press a button and it works 24/7. And that's why we're trying to concentrate on just like one slice of that, which is, can we get an AI model to pick up an object, put a label on it, and put it on the conveyor belt?
Yeah, it is interesting because it is a direct evolution from Bear. So the wheeled base is essentially a Bear.
It is actually a Bear
It
base.
is actually a so that's the next challenge, right? You kind of, to a certain extent, were able to conquer the bottom, and now it's all about the top.
Exactly. So using Bear's API, we can set the robot, go to this place, go to that place. We can use their mapping app and all of this. So when the robot gets to, let's say, a pallet, our system can then just concentrate on using reinforcement learning for the long horizon task of actually making the pallet or taking the pallet. Or then we can use what we call imitation learning, where a human operator can actually control the robot to pick up boxes. One of the hardest challenges we're trying to do as well is how to put a label on a box in the correct place, and that's what we're trying to train our robot to do ourselves.
I mean, the biggest, as somebody who covers universities and early stage startups, to me, the thing that is changing the game and like continually changing the game is how we train the robots themselves. So, you mentioned two of the primary styles, but it's evolving so quickly. You have to be nimble when it comes to like what the future is going to look like and how quickly these can actually be trained to be deployed.
I know, and being a CEO and being in robotics for 20 years is incredibly hard, even for myself, to keep up. That's why I went out and hired the best people I could find. And even there, some of our AI engineers that say have been doing this for 4 or 5 years, you get people from academia. One of our staff literally graduated with his PhD today, comes into our team as like, this is the new cutting edge, which then supersedes work that's like 3 years old. That's like, this is old, this is new. You no longer need like 200-300 demonstrations. You can even do one-shot learning for some of these tasks where you can literally just take one example and then using the power of AI again, you can actually take that one example and make thousands of synthetic data from that one example to train your model.
Yeah, that was the big thing in the NVIDIA keynote is both synthetic data. I mean, the executive who gave the talk was saying, I haven't heard it I haven't heard it put this way, but that like at the end of the day, actual real human training will amount to about 1% of the actual data on these robots.
Yeah, so at the moment, for example, we will record a couple of videos using actual computer vision. You could say, this is the robot, this is the box. And then it will mask out those, and then you can actually put in, by using these quite cool like dolly models, you can actually then put different warehouses, different textures. You can even put different textures on the box, and you can even make the box slightly larger, slightly smaller, and then put that into your training set. So now you don't need hundreds of or even thousands of hours of human example. You can get like an hour's worth of example of picking up boxes or putting a label on it, and then create all this synthetic data to make the models more robust.
I'm always curious what the pipeline is, from going from seeing a new technology in the research space. Obviously, there's a lot of them that will build companies around it. But do you work with the technologies? Do you work with it's been a very long day. Do you work with the universities in terms of like recruiting or new technologies?
We don't work at the moment because we're just too small, only a 26 people team. We don't work with the university, but I do go to a lot of conferences to try and steal the best and the brightest.
You stand outside the school on the street sometimes.
We went to, like in January, we went to the #1 conference in England called Manipulate, if I correctly, and that had all the PhDs there who actually do imitation learning. We talked to hundreds of PhD students and managed to persuade 3 of them to come and join us for this crazy ride. Some of them were postdocs, made them quit university to come and join us. And, the other one that graduated today, we're like, we'll give you a job offer now. Come and join us in 4 months' time when you graduate.
Yeah, so you started with, I was actually speaking with some folks from Bear, they're here as well the other day, and I commented on the fact that like you kind of picked, I don't want to say it's the most chaotic environment because in a lot of ways it's strange. Like restaurants are strange because they are structured to a certain extent, but they are, when it comes to the human element, incredibly chaotic.
So this is unfortunately, you're 100% true. When we first started out in my previous company, which was actually just a waiter book taking food from the kitchen to the table, within about 3 or 4 weeks, we actually had a working prototype that was working in the real world. And we're like, this is easy. And then you got to the reality of when a restaurant's busy, they'll put tables together. There'll be 20 people around on one table. And then you're like, but this is my waypoint. And now there's a table in the way. So then you start getting in the complexity of the real deployment. And I think this is one thing I've learned, luckily, unluckily, over the last 20 years. It's very easy to make something work for a pilot or for a demo, but then when you go and start expanding, all these customers just want something slightly different. You know, all the environments are different, the tasks are slightly different. And if you're not careful, you either become an integrator where you're now having to manage hundreds of people going out and do these custom installations, or you end up with a code base that has so many flags or so many different variations to handle all this complexity in the real world.
That's interesting, actually. It's just occurred to me, and now it's very obvious that the companies that would be ordering a Bear robot, or the restaurants that would be ordering a Bear robot, are the most chaotic. They're the ones who need the help the most.
Yeah, and lesson learned, but in a way, it was good for us because it made it harder for other entries. So this is how we got investment where SoftBank, as other companies, they went out, they actually bought without us knowing our robot, our competitors, and when they actually put it into the field, they realized we've solved a lot of these hard challenges that other companies were just ignoring.
So early on, when you got in, was there, let me step back, actually. Was it always restaurants for Bear?
So the backstory is John, my co-founder, actually owned a restaurant. He was a Googler. I don't know if he doesn't mind saying this. He thought he'd buy a restaurant because it'd be a nice place to hang out there with his friends.
Sure.
About 6 months in, he realized it was very hard, managing a lot of staff, very chaotic. That's where he personally came up with the idea of a robot to help him. And that's when I actually met him, when he was like, let's build a robot to solve this problem he personally had in the restaurant.
I asked because I'm wondering in those early days whether the kind of long-term, maybe it still is, you know, you're not there in the same capacity, but whether the long-term goal was always to diversify into other verticals.
Great question. This is one thing, to be honest, we internally struggled with. Are we a restaurant robot, restaurant company, or are we a robot company?
Yeah.
So this actually meant had some implication of what we were going to do. So we always go to Robot Restaurant Association conference, which is massive. And we were like, if we are a restaurant company, does it make sense to us to go and buy a point of sales company and then integrate that? Do we then go into the back of house with a flippy style robot? Do we go and put AI in the back of house, you know, that? Or are we a robot company where we should go into different verticals, warehouses, hospitality, hospitals, care homes? In the end, we decided we're a robot company just for the simple fact we realized our core competence and our skill set was making the world's best navigation.
So, okay, we've only got a minute left right now, so but I'm still going to ask you a big question. So you know, you leave to a certain in a certain capacity, you leave Bear and you start this company. It just wasn't Kinesi or, you know, this robot that we're seeing wasn't something that made sense within the broader context of Bear.
Yeah, it probably makes more sense now, but at the time then, they were expanding out to different verticals at AMR. They have their Carty downstairs, which is the warehouse. They were going out into hotels. They were expanding there. And at the time, it just didn't make sense for them, just for the capacity to go and do this. But I actually started this company in their headquarters. You know, jokingly, people said I was treating it as a WeWork. So, that's why I built it with the base. And we do actually have incredibly good ties.
Well, congratulations. Thank you so much. I think I might see you in London in a couple of weeks. I don't know
Definitely,
if you might be at a
humanoids.
certain robotics event out there. So it was a pleasure, and I guess we'll speak soon in a very different time zone.
Definitely.
Thanks
Thank you very much for having me.
You may have noticed we've been growing faster, bigger, every year, more industries, more people, more impact. Well, in 2026, we're going back to Chicago. Automate returns to the Windy City with an expanded footprint, more technology, more solutions across more industries. Innovation at scale yet again. Now, for 2027, we have a very special announcement. Vegas. A new stage for the future of automation, connections to new customers, a gateway into new markets. Welcome to the next era of Automate. We'll see you there.